distribution, and that's why we have measures of inequality there. No, we can also have measures of concentration from household surveys. Nobody stops us from doing that. But fiscal data, by definition, do not cover the entire distribution, and particularly not in poor countries, because very few people actually file tax returns. So they have to go with concentration because they don't have an option. You know, even in the U.S., you have about 10% of the population who don't file tax returns. But in rich countries, it's easier. But you know, in countries like India or China, very few people do. So they then assume that, of course, those people who do, let's suppose 2% of people do, they say, well, this is the richest 2%, which may be the case, or it may not be the case, but let's suppose that it is the case. You still do not have distribution. So they're, to some extent, they cannot escape from using concentration measures. Until the time comes when we have everybody files tax returns, or now, which exists now in more and more countries, but mostly in Northern Europe, is you have administrative data. Actually, Sweden is planning, as you might have read, to actually get rid totally of cash. And when I was recently in Sweden, actually many places don't accept cash, actually. So you know, and then you would have, in principle, every transaction or every source of income would be recorded. Already now they're close to that. So whatever somebody pays you for something, it would have to put your, like, suppose, social security number. So then you have really full administrative data, and then you would have the entire distribution. So it could be that we are moving towards that, which would make both tax data and household surveys to some extent redundant. But you know, we are not, for 99% of the countries, we are not there. And for some reason, I don't like the idea of every transaction being recorded. But you know, that's what we are moving towards.
But the companies do now anyway. Google does that.
Yeah, we're already, I mean, obviously in the US, you're actually, when you buy, it is recorded on your credit card. So, you know, it can be very easily sort of attached to you. But still there are, like, transactions that you can do in cash. And most places, I think actually even legally, they cannot refuse, right? Can they legally refuse to accept cash? I don't think so. But I've seen actually in Sweden there are like signs, we don't accept cash. No, so it's interesting. Yeah.
Wasn't Sweden the one that wanted to institute a basic income?
Switzerland.
Oh, it was Switzerland.
Switzerland, yeah.
Okay.
Even the demonetization policy that happened in India
Yeah, I
was
think it's
aimed
similar.
to
Yes, yeah.
develop a cashless society, but
Yeah.
we are not, like, not the entire population is that literate. So.
No, that was, I think, motivated by the attempt to get rid of black money.
Yeah.
But what I've read and actually heard also from a friend, it has not developed exactly in that particular
No, it has
direction.
not.
No.
Yeah.
And what I was told by somebody who was there is that they had to pay, because they couldn't get money anywhere.
Yeah.
So they had to pay 20% discount, actually, to pay 20% to people. Like, for example, they give a credit card, $100, and get $80 back in cash.
It's happening. Yes.
Yeah, so it's really,
it's mismanaged.
it seems to, but it was so sudden, which of course maybe you can understand, because if he wants to get rid of all that black money, it has to be sudden. But it really affected like ordinary people.
A lot of people have died also.
Because they couldn't actually get any money for food and stuff.
Yeah. No, not because like they were starving or anything, but like a lot have been standing in queues.
Yeah, I saw that standing in lines for
Stampede.
It is a horrible feeling that actually, it's. But you know, this is the issue of when the economies become very. I mean, this is not exactly the same, but when the economies become very, very sophisticated, they become also very brittle.
Yeah.
Because let's suppose that you had, for example, a war in the U.S. The same thing would happen. Actually, all your credit cards, all your cash, nothing really matters anymore. Because it's really, nobody's going to give you something because you just show them nice credit card, if they can do nothing with it.
Yeah.
So it's really, you realize how brittle these the economies are, and how even our skills are very much skills of a developed society. Because if you had that kind of a reversion, and which you could have in the case of a nuclear war, then what are you going to sell? I mean, what kind of skills? There are no demand. I think actually most people would not have anything to sell, because the skill level that you needed for if the society goes suddenly plunges downwards. Of course, technological knowledge is there, but you would need people. So technology would be there, but you would still need people to do, to kind of get water back, decontamination, all that, and then the skills that we have, we would be able. Nobody would hire anybody to teach, inequality.
How high is global inequality?
Is it a question here, or did I write it?
It's on there.
Yeah. Okay. So I cannot find it. Where is it? You have
Under global
gone.
inequality, it's 3 concepts of international global inequality.
So let me start going a little bit faster. I can tell you what is the number, but I would like to see it. Oh, you already went to the third page. Okay. So let me go faster, because we'll then. Yeah, I want to go in order. No, I want to go in some order. Okay, wealth versus income is stock versus flows. We have talked a lot about that. A stock is something which is measured at a point in time. For a flow, you need somebody to tell you unit of time, because obviously income in today. Just think, how is my income today? How much did I receive today? Well, most of us didn't receive anything today. So that's today's income is 0. But if you ask me what is income over a month, I probably received something, and then over a year. So that's the difference between income and flow. Okay, so and then inequality in wealth is generally, not generally, I think almost practically always, I've never seen it, less than income or than inequality. It's always higher than inequality in wealth. Inequality in wealth is always higher than inequality in income. And then inequality in consumption is always lower than inequality in income. And the reasons are simple, because to consume you need to have a minimal, amount of money that you spend on consumption, and for income you can have a 0 income. So the order is consumption the least unequal, then income in the middle, and wealth the most unequal of the 3. And there it's important also that comes next, and I will skip that go very quickly. Remember that tables that we had with South Africa and with Thailand, which showed you like how the Gini coefficient changes depending whether you use consumption or income, and depending whether you use per capita or per equivalent adult. So the most equal would be if you were to use equivalent scales on consumption. Why? Because consumption makes things more equal, and equivalent scales make things even more equal, because they actually, for the large families, otherwise you divide by all imagine a family of 8 kids. You would divide by number 10. But for the equivalent units, these 8 kids are not going to be equivalent to 8 adults. So there will be actually higher income of that poor family. So in other words, it would seem the poor family would be less poor when you do equivalent units. Does it make sense? But think really in extreme cases. If you have, and Africa is a good example of that. If you have large families, Africa is shown more unequal than it really is, because we use per capita basis. And you have family of 10 people, in Mali. So you take the whole income and divide by 10. But in reality, the 8 kids do not have the needs which are equal to 8 adults. Suppose that they eat less, just for assumption, because I think it's basically true. And then, if we were to use equivalent units, we would actually only have these 8 kids being equal in terms of needs to 5 adults. So we would take their income and divide by 7. So why I'm actually pushing this whole line of argument, because one has to realize that our decision to do on per capita basis, which is based on simplicity and on ability to connect with GDP per capita, does penalize generally poor countries where the average household size is very large. So it actually presents inequality higher than probably is. And I think good example is really think of Africa, where you have large household size, and even some Central American countries as well, compared to countries essentially in Europe or Japan, or Nordic countries where average household size is 1.5. So it's a big difference. Okay, top income underestimation in household surveys. This is something also we talked about, is that essentially the problem with household surveys is that underestimates the top income, and it generally underestimates the bottom because people are not covered, they are not, they are institutionalized, or they are homeless, and so on. The problem with the fiscal data is that they are, for the reason that I said before, they are not complete. They are only the world of taxpayers, and the definition of income changes depending on whatever the government or the Congress decides that actually should be taxable income. So if tomorrow Congress were to decide, Trump decides actually with the Congress that interest and dividends are not taxable at all, you don't have to report them on your tax form. It would never be included in the data that we have on income. So that's an important thing, because it is really kind of a political definition of income. So it would vary in time in a country, or it could vary between countries depending what the country believes is taxable. So whatever is not taxable will not be there. And then Pareto adjustment is used precisely, for many reasons, but in household surveys we use it because we know that the top is underestimated, and we know that Pareto line is quite good for the top. So you don't need to go into all the details, but basically we use Pareto adjustment in order to correct the underestimation of the top income in household surveys. And this is what we know in the paper with Christoph Lackner, what Christoph Lackner and I did in the paper. Okay, that concludes almost the whole page one. Within national inequalities, wait, let me see. I printed out more than, because this is I actually combined. Sorry. So it concludes, because I actually I combined things that are not even included in this class. Global inequality. Is this how it goes in your?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 concepts of global inequality. The first one is obvious, concept 1, concept 2, concept 3, right? The first one is that you measure inequality only in GDP per capita, or mean income, without accounting for population size. So it's actually every country generates only one number, which is GDP per capita, or mean income of that country, and you don't care about population size. Obviously, that's not an ideal measure, but it's a nice measure if you really address the issues of convergence or divergence, because in principle, when economists talk about convergence, they're looking at each country as a kind of a lab. And in principle, poor countries should grow faster than the rich countries, but they say, well, we don't care whether this lab is a big lab or a small lab. We just treat every country the same. But if you want to move to people, then you actually have to do concept 2, which sort of does population weighting. So the GDP per capita of China doesn't have the same importance as GDP per capita of Luxembourg, because simply there are many more people.
Oh, that's a difference.
So that will be the population. The first is unweighted, simply mean incomes of all the countries. The second is weighted. So now each country, so in other words, like to go back to the example of the classrooms, if I were to compare, if the world is composed of 6 classrooms here, one thing would be for me to compare just mean income of this classroom with another, and so on, without regard that in next room you might have 200 people and we are only 20 here. A second possibility, I take the mean income of this classroom and just multiply it by 20, and then the next classroom is 200. But the third possibility, which is the global inequality, I take our actual incomes and compare with everybody else. Because concept 2, we don't come with our actual incomes. We each come with the income of the mean of this class. Right? So that's the difference between concept 2 and 3. So in concept 2, I would just calculate what is the mean of this class and say, okay, this is $100. And although I might have 300 and somebody might have 5. Or the other way around. So I then actually take only that mean income and compare with them, but I give the weight of 20, because we are 20 people here. But then that's the concept 2. And the concept 3, I